Okay, go ahead.
So, are you ready?
Go ahead, yes.
Thank you. What is the characteristic difference between Orthodox Christianity and Catholic Christianity on the one hand, and Orthodox Christianity and Protestant Christianity on the other? Is there an essential difference between Orthodoxy's relationships to both?
First, so far as Catholic Christianity goes, the root difference, the most important single difference in my view, is the papal claims. We are willing, on the Orthodox side, to accept that in a reunited Christendom, the Pope would have the first place. But we don't believe that he should have universal power of jurisdiction. He simply has a role of coordination, of leadership, but so far as the Christian East goes, not a power of direct, immediate, and ordinary jurisdiction. So there I see the biggest difference between Orthodoxy and Rome. Of course, there is also the question of the procession of the Holy Spirit, the Filioque, and to some extent the question of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary, which we Orthodox don't agree with. But at the present moment, in the international dialogue between our two churches, we are concentrating on the papacy. And I think if we could solve that, the other issues wouldn't be so difficult. As regards Protestantism, it is much more complex because there is such variety of belief among the Protestants. In the past, the group with which the Orthodox felt closest was the Anglican Church, the Episcopalians. I would say the high point of our dialogue with the Anglicans was in the 1930s. But there have been a lot of changes in Anglicanism which are difficult for the Orthodox. Not only the ordination of women priests and bishops, but also the question of appointing practicing homosexuals to high positions in the church, and the practice that is now beginning in some Anglican churches of blessing same-sex marriages. And that is very problematic for the Orthodox. With the Roman Catholics, we have a great deal in common. Our view of the communion of saints, our view of the sacraments is not so different, though of course there are some points of divergence. Whereas with the Protestant world, we have far more differences.
Why is the finding of ancient Christianity an important quest? What might you tell a modern Western evangelical who suspected that such inquiry about ancient Christianity was inspired only by pomp and a fancy for ritual?
The first and most important thing about ancient Christianity is the faith of the early church, not ritual, not pomp. We Orthodox believe that for our understanding of the faith today, we should look back to the period of the ecumenical councils, of the ancient fathers, to the period where the Greek East and the Latin West were united in communion. And what we are looking for is primarily what was the understanding of the faith in the ancient church. How did they understand the New Testament? So we would look at the continuity from the apostolic period onwards. That would be our guide. But of course, tradition needs to be living tradition. We cannot simply go back to the period of the early fathers and the councils in an archaeological way. We cannot simply repeat in a parrot-like manner what they said. We have to relive their experience. We have to ask ourselves, how are we to interpret the message of the early church, the unchanging message? How are we to present this in terms of today's world? So our honoring of tradition is living tradition. But we start with the faith rather than with a particular type of ritual. Precious though the Byzantine liturgy is, what is fundamentally important is the faith that is enshrined in the liturgy.
Then the ancient traditions that are not extant within modern Western Protestantism, why are these facets of ancient Christianity so crucial for the faith?
We should take as our starting point the Holy Eucharist, communion in the body and blood of Christ. We are to see the Church essentially as a Eucharistic community. The Church becomes truly itself when celebrating the divine liturgy. So what is lacking for us in much of Protestantism is the acceptance that the Holy Communion is truly the body and blood of Christ. That is believed, I suppose, by the Lutherans, but we also, as Orthodox, believe that the divine liturgy is a mystical sacrifice. That, of course, the Lutherans would not accept. But for so many Protestants, the Eucharist is seen simply as a memorial meal, and that would not be sufficient for us as Orthodox. I was brought up from childhood in the Anglican Church, and I have good memories of Anglicanism. If I left the Anglican Church and became Orthodox, it was not for negative reasons, because I objected to things in Anglicanism, but rather for positive reasons, because I found in Orthodoxy a fullness that I did not find in Anglicanism. Now, the Anglican Church that I knew 60 years ago was very different from what it is now. I was brought up in a traditional Anglicanism, mainly in the High Church tradition, and so I was brought up in an Anglicanism that honored the fathers and the ancient councils. And certainly I was taught that the Eucharist is the true body and blood of Christ, and that one should go to confession. But what troubled me then, and would trouble me today, is the diversity of viewpoints within Anglicanism. That there is, of course, the High Church tradition in which I was brought up, but there is also the evangelical wing of the Anglican Church, and still more troubling, the liberal wing, liberal Anglicans who deny the bodily resurrection of Christ, even his Godhead. And I was troubled by this diversity within Anglicanism. I found in becoming Orthodox, I did not have to change my faith, but I could say this is the faith of the Church, instead of having to say as an Anglican, this is the faith of the particular group within Anglicanism to which I belong. So I would prefer to say that in becoming Orthodox, I was not rejecting Anglicanism, but I was finding a firm basis for the faith I had already held as an Anglican. But a firm basis in the sense that I could say this is the teaching of the Church, not just this is the teaching of a certain group with which I am linked. And in that sense, I found a fullness within Orthodoxy. I do not wish to say that other Christian bodies have nothing. We are not to think in terms of a contrast between light and then unredeemed darkness. There are many elements of Orthodoxy to be found in Anglicanism, particularly the High Church Anglican tradition, as represented by people like the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Michael Ramsey. But one could not say as an Anglican, this is the faith of our Church. As an Orthodox, I am able to say, this is not simply the faith of a group that I choose to belong to. This is the faith of the total Church. It gave me a firm basis for what I had already been taught to believe as an Anglican.
Uniquely bring us through the world in a way that private, personal faith alone cannot.
To answer that, we might first ask, how did the Church start? And what we are told in the opening chapters of the book of Acts was that those who turned to Christ, who were converted, were first of all baptized. And then we are told that what the early Christians did was to break bread together, to celebrate the Eucharist. And the sharing together in Holy Communion from the very beginning has been central to the life of the Church. So Christ did not simply say at the Last Supper, believe these things. He said, do this in remembrance of me. Christ bequeathed to his disciples not just a theory, an ideology, but an action. And an action that could only be performed by people together, not alone. The action of the Eucharist. So yes, indeed, personal faith is presupposed. We do each need to believe personally. But that is not enough. Since the Christianity is founded on the Eucharist, the command of Christ at the Last Supper, do this, we need to belong to a worshipping community that celebrates the holy mystery of his body and blood. This is why simply to have personal faith is not enough. That personal faith is expressed through the corporate action of the church community, the corporate action of Holy Communion. The Orthodox Church, the understanding of its members, is the true Church of Christ on earth. It is the one Catholic Apostolic Church of Christ. Therefore, we would be happy if everybody became Orthodox. In that sense, the Orthodox Church has a universal mission. But we in the Orthodox Church do not think it right to practice negative proselytism. In other words, we do not wish to seek out members of other churches and to attack their beliefs and seek to undermine their loyalty to the church they belong to. We do not think it right in this way to attack other churches and to disturb Christians in their faith. If people ask us about the Orthodox Church, indeed we are happy to tell them. And if they feel that they should join the Orthodox Church, then yes, the door is open. But I do not think it our task to undertake evangelism and missionary work against other Christians. If we are going to undertake evangelistic work, then let us go to the people who belong to no church and have no Christian faith. And there are plenty of those in Britain and in Western Europe. So I do not think of us as carrying out a missionary campaign at the expense of other Christians. But of course, if they ask us, we would have in sincerity to tell them the points where we didn't agree with them.
What do you make of this statement? Quote, as the first 1,000 years of Christendom were those of unity, and the second 1,000 of disunity, so the third 1,000 years of Christendom will be of reunity.
First of all, unity was not complete in the first 1,000 years. Already there was a division in the 5th and 6th century between those who accepted the Council of Chalcedon, 451, and those who rejected it. And so we have already a division between the non-Chalcedonian churches, that's to say the Copts, the Ethiopians, the Syrians, the Armenians, and on the other side, the Chalcedonian churches, the Orthodox Church, and the Roman Catholic Church. So there was already a division in the first millennium. Now, in the second half of the 20th century, from the 1960s onwards, there was considerable progress in reconciliation between the Orthodox Church, that's to say the Greek, Russian, and Romanian and other Orthodox churches on the one side, and the non-Chalcedonians, the Copts, the Ethiopians, the Armenians on the other. And they have not yet restored communion, but it has been said on each side that the main doctrinal difficulties concerning the person of Christ have been clarified and agreement has been reached. So I hope in the next 20 or 30 years there would be reconciliation there. So there was division in the first millennium behind the division between Rome and Protestantism in the 16th century, and behind the division between Eastern and Western Christendom, which evolved over a long period, but is usually fixed, the division, to the 11th century. There is this earlier division that we should not forget. So in the end of the second millennium, there's already been a movement towards reconciliation. I consider that it's going to be much more difficult for an agreement to be reached between Orthodoxy and Rome. But with the help of the Holy Spirit, all things are possible, and we should remain in dialogue together. What will happen in the third millennium is known to God and not to me. We should not isolate the incident of 1054, the estrangement between the Orthodox Church and Rome was a gradually evolving process. And the roots of it go back a long time before the 11th century. And on the other hand, the division was not completed until some time after the 11th century. So 1054 is just one incident in a much longer story. What happened was that there were already tensions between East and West. Cardinal Humbert came as delegate from the Pope to Constantinople on what was intended to be a mission of reconciliation. But he and the Patriarch of Constantinople, Michael Cerularius, quickly fell out with one another. One of the key issues at that time was the use of bread in the Eucharist. In the West, unleavened bread is used. In the East, leavened bread. And that led to quite a sharp conflict. In fact, today, many people on both sides would say this is not, in the end, a fundamental doctrinal question. There is room in the Church for different liturgical practices. The West may follow its practice, and the East its practice over the nature of the bread in the Eucharist. That is a view that many Orthodox would take today. However, in the 11th century, the two sides were not so willing to allow for diversity. But already at an earlier point in the 9th century, there had been a disagreement between Patriarch Photius at Constantinople and Pope Nicholas in the West in the 860s. And there the issues were, yes, the procession of the Holy Spirit and also the primacy of the Pope. And these two questions were not really solved in the 9th century. And so they also underlay the difficulties in the 11th. Anyway, Humbert and Cerularius disagreed. Cardinal Humbert lost patience. He therefore drew up an anathema excommunicating Michael Cerularius, and he put it on the altar of the church in St. Sophia. And in retaliation, Michael Cerularius and his synod excommunicated Cardinal Humbert. But the excommunication of Humbert was not directed to the Byzantine Church as a whole, only against Cerularius. And the response of Cerularius was not directed against the Pope, but only against Humbert. So the excommunications were limited in scope. However, when Humbert went home, he presented the whole incident as a great victory for the Roman See, and the papacy endorsed his anathema. And on the other side, the emperor supported Michael Cerularius. So in that way, the scope of the anathemas was enlarged. But this was not the end of friendly relations between the two churches. And in fact, in Byzantium, the incident of 1054 was quickly forgotten. What was much more damaging was the sack of Constantinople in 1204 by the Fourth Crusade. That is something which the Christian East has never forgotten or forgiven. So I think the schism dates, if we want to choose a single date, much more from 1204 than from 1054. But the roots of the division go back at least to the 9th century, to the conflict between Photius and Rome, even though communion was not permanently broken at that point. First of all, the will of our Lord is quite clear. In the prayer that he offered at the Last Supper in John 17, he says with very great emphasis, referring to his disciples, "May they all be one. As you, Father, are one with me and I with you, may they also be one in us." So, first of all, the unity of Christians is to reflect the unity in diversity of the Holy Trinity. That is the basis that Christ gives in his prayer for unity. We are to be one as Christ and the Father are one. Our unity reflects the mystery of the Holy Trinity. Church is an icon of the Holy Trinity. So the basis for the prayer for unity is in the life of God himself. But a second reason, as alongside and arising out of Christ's prayer at the Last Supper, what the early Christians did, as I've already mentioned, from the very beginning was to break bread together to celebrate the mystery of Holy Communion. Christ wanted his disciples to be visibly one, to share visibly in the Eucharist. And therefore, the heart of the problem of Christian unity is this: we do not receive communion together. That's the real problem. Now, you might say, in that case, why do we not just have communion together and that will solve everything? But Holy Communion is not to be separated from the faith. And until we agree in the faith on the Orthodox understanding, we should not share in the sacraments. However, I speak of agreement in faith, not agreement in theological opinions. There is room for diversity of viewpoints. What we are seeking is unity, not uniformity. And what we have to clarify when we as separated Christians talk together is which things belong to the heart and essence of the Christian faith, on which we must agree, and which things can be left to private opinion. Now, the different Christian groups do not agree on where to draw the line. So we do need to be one in faith in order to be one in the sacraments. But unity in the vision of Christ was indeed to be visible because it is founded on the Holy Eucharist, which is a visible action.
Or how that would work out in a practical way. if there's any consensus on that among the Orthodox.
The phrase first among equals is often applied, is it not, to the Pope, and that is probably what you are thinking of, the way it is applied to the Pope. There are 3 levels of authority in the Church, and this was recently stated in the Ravenna document put out by the International Commission for Dialogue between the Orthodox and the Roman Catholics in 2007. And the Ravenna document distinguishes first the authority of the local bishop in his diocese. Then you have regional authority or regional primacy. And that means for us Orthodox the position of the patriarchs and heads of the autocephalous churches. And then thirdly, the Ravenna document distinguished the universal primacy of the Pope. Now, I think the phrase first among equals applies to the second level. The Pope is the senior among the patriarchs, and therefore the first among equals. But Ravenna also said, and the Orthodox agreed with this, that the Pope does have a special ministry beyond that of being patriarch in the West, that he is also endowed with a universal authority over the whole Church, not a power of direct jurisdiction on the Orthodox understanding, but he has a certain ministry to watch over the unity of the Church. But the Ravenna document says there must be mutual consultation. The Pope as first should not do anything without consulting the patriarchs, and they should not do anything without consulting the Pope. Mutual consultation. All of this is implied in the Ravenna document rather than stated clearly. But there is there the suggestion that the Pope, as Supreme Pontiff, has a ministry that is different from that of the other patriarchs. Now, not all Orthodox would accept that, but the Orthodox at Ravenna agreed to it. However, we are now having further discussions to work out exactly what this signifies. So the title first among equals applies really to the middle level of authority, what I call regional primacy, the patriarchs. But there is an understanding among many Orthodox that the Pope has a special position in the Church, and there's plenty of evidence to support that from the first millennium when there was communion between us. And we are looking at that evidence at the moment and trying to see whether we can reach a common understanding on this basis.
What would you say to Christians of all stripes, whether Southern Baptist or Methodist or Catholic or even Eastern Orthodox, that they can do to work for, in their own small ways, greater unity among one another?
The most important thing that we can do to bring about greater unity is for each one of us in our different church traditions to come closer to Christ. 3 things go together in work for unity: truth, unity, and holiness. There can be no unity except unity in the truth. But also there can be no unity except unity in holiness. If we would all draw nearer to Christ, we would also all of us draw nearer to one another. So the best thing we can do to help the work of Christianity, the work of Christian unity, each one of us, is to be converted more deeply, more radically to Christ, our one Savior.